Greetings and welcome to this edition of
Positronic Hypersonic.
I'm Barry P. Cook, and I'm here to talk to you about the latest episode of Star Trek Discovery, the penultimate episode of the season and the series, called Lagrange Point, named after an actual real-life space thing. As discovered by a scientist whose last name is, you guessed it, Lagrange. As the episode starts, Saru is back with new duds and flowers for the president of Not Vulcan. Apparently, news has traveled fast about the Breen internal shenanigans, which include a push by another Primarch to seize power and potentially the progenitor tech. Discovery jumps to the location of said tech but lands too close to a black hole due to prior nav system damage, which it takes a bit of doing involving a second black hole next to it in order not to get sucked into. The crew then realized that the progenitor tech is between the two black holes in a seeming Lagrange point and is about the size of a shuttle, but before they can grab it, the Breen ship arrives and takes it because, of course, it does. It turns out that Michael was given a secret phrase by Fake Book back in the Mindscape that's needed to operate the tech, so the Breen can't use it right away. The crew then devises the plan to get aboard the Breen dreadnought and steal the tech back. A scene which did allow for a cool moment for Adira. So the crew, including Reese and Book, don some replicated Breen suits and exploit a small weakness in the Breen's shields to get aboard. But Adira is 4 foot nothing, and Michael isn't exactly the right height either, so they're gonna stand out a bit, which, okay.
Too little short for
Breen.
Trooper.
They take a shuttle, which isn't detected for some reason, closer to the Breen ship and beam in just before their shuttle is vaporized in some radiation. And when they find themselves in the presence of a couple of Breen soldiers in the particular hallway where they landed, without setting off any kind of intruder alert, I might add, which they were surprised to find was going to be the case just before they beamed, Michael has to improvise to get them to go away, and of course, she succeeds. It seems that the shuttle-sized object isn't actually a container for the Breen tech, but a container for some type of portal to an unknown spot where one guesses the tech is actually located. Michael and Book have another encounter with some Breen on their way to the shuttle bay as Reese and Adira head to the bridge, who question why they're there, and once again, Michael is able to get them to bugger off before pulling Book into a hallway to have a conversation about their relationship. And the fact that she acknowledges that it's not the best time for that doesn't make it any less dumb. Speaking of dumb, this entire time, the crew was able to communicate with each other over comms in their suits without what they were saying coming out of their helmets to be heard by everyone else standing around them. So I'm not sure how they did that. There was a cool moment on the Bridge of Discovery between Rayner and Tilly surrounding the fact that Rayner still doesn't want to actually take the captain's chair when he's left in command. Back in the Dreadnought, Michael and Book have to kick some Breen ass when they're ordered to walk away from the shuttle bay after their helmet scans don't allow them immediate entry.
Despite the fact that at no point during this episode do we see that Reese and Adira had similar trouble gaining access to the bridge. The bridge.
Once inside the shuttle bay, where there are a ton of other Breen, Book and Michael go about trying to take down an isolation field around the portal chamber device so that they can get it beamed out. Of course, the guards from outside the shuttle bay are discovered to be missing, and an alarm finally goes off. Saru, meanwhile, heads out alone to an interception point in a jump-capable shuttle to try to diplomatically stop the other Primarch from dangerously complicating things for Discovery and the Federation. Before he actually departs, there's a woo-woo scene between he and his gal pal, the president of Not Vulcan, and the not sexual tension was palpable.
Ow!
When it seems that at least part of the away team is about to be discovered, Rayner makes a bold move and hails the Dreadnought as a distraction to give Michael time to get the shield surrounding the dimensional chamber down. He offers to protect the Dreadnought from the encroaching Breen fleet belonging to the other Primarch if they turn the tech over to him, but they don't take the bait. When the containment field around the progenitor tech portal thing goes down, the Breen present in the room immediately figure out that there are intruders, and they capture Michael, along with Book, preventing her from beaming the chamber off, which anyone could have seen coming. With coded instructions from Michael over comms, which are still active for Michael even though her helmet's been removed, Raynor decides to fly the Discovery into the Breen shuttle bay, apparently ripping it apart, so that the away team can be beamed aboard along with the progenitor portal thing once everything is blown into space. With the shields on the Dreadnought down, Discovery is able to blast through the shuttle bay containment field and fly Discovery inside the Dreadnought after beaming Reese and Adira off just prior. But before the portal chamber is knocked out into space, Michael leaps into it after Maul, much to Book's dismay. With Book beamed safely back aboard Discovery, the crew inexplicably tries to transport the portal energy ball that emerges from the chamber once it explodes upon hitting space, but are unsuccessful. With Michael's status unknown, Raynor tells the crew that Discovery must get the situation in hand before finally taking to the captain's chair with much determination. And that's where the episode ended. So this is not the worst episode of television. It was not the worst episode of Star Trek Discovery by any means. And, that's high praise for Discovery. So I guess you could say I liked this episode okay. There were definitely moments that I thought were well done. During the scene where the team is discussing how they're going to get aboard the Breen ship, there was a very cool moment for the Adira character, which I mentioned earlier. And even though I really don't like that character, they did write a cool moment for them in this scene, and I have to acknowledge that. I thought Mary Weissman as Tilly shined in this scene. And really, she shined throughout this episode, which, I guess is true for her all the time. She's a really good actress. It's just that the character has so often been overly goofy that I don't think she gets credit where it's due often enough. But in this episode, they kept the goofy to a minimum, if there was any at all, as it regards her. And I thought Mary Weissman did a really good job. So there was that. I liked the moments on the Bridge of Discovery where Reese was in command and Tilly was his second, and they were getting stuff done and helping the mission along any way they could. I thought that was all written well and shot well and acted well, so I enjoyed that. I especially enjoyed the moment between Tilly and Raynor where you can tell they've developed a cool rapport. And, I thought that was well done, and the groundwork had been laid for it in prior episodes, so I thought that was quite good. I've liked the Raynor character since the beginning of his being on Discovery. And, this episode was no exception in that department. The character does a good job. The actor does a good job. So I liked that. Seeing the Discovery fly inside the much, much larger Breen ship was pretty cool. It reminded me, in a way, of a scene from another Star Trek, specifically Star Trek V.
Stand by to execute emergency landing plan B.
What's emergency landing plan B?
I don't have a clue.
B, as in barricade.
He can't be serious.
Bird of prey bearing 105, Mark II.
Go, sir.
But so I enjoyed that. I enjoyed how they used Reese in this episode. They used him well. I guess it was last week where he was temporarily in command, or maybe it was the week before. They used him well there. And they used him really well in this episode. And I was like to see that. He actually got to go on the away mission and contribute to the success of the mission, what little success there was. And I say success because they did wrest control of the portal thing from the Breen. And that was cool. They actually used a character that wasn't Michael. And I thought that was pretty cool. But, once again, there was a bunch of dumb. And as I'm calling this out, which I always do, I want to make sure I'm being fair to Discovery and that I'm not forgetting that past Star Trek has had a lot of dumb in some of their episodes. That isn't my recollection. I don't recall past Star Trek having the kind of wicked simplistic moments of big dumb stupid in the episodes every week like this show does. Season 7 of Star Trek The Next Generation had a lot of dumb, and I called it out at the time. Of course, not on YouTube. This was back when I had a very popular 1-hour program on local public access television. And I don't recall any of the other shows having this much dumb. There might have been some stuff on Enterprise that broke with canon because it was a prequel, but I don't remember that show having any dumb in it. But I realized that I may be forgetting a bunch of dumb, so I don't know. People can tell me in the comments, but I think still on balance, Discovery has much more dumb in it week in and week out than the other Star Trek shows ever did. And I think it's justified to call it out. Now, when I say dumb, what kind of dumb am I talking about? Well, the away team goes in wearing Breen suits so that they'll blend in with the other Breen on the Dreadnought. But the problem is that most of the Breen are like virtually the same height or very, very close in height. But you've got Adira and Michael who are obviously shorter than the other Breen. So right off the bat, that's not going to work.
Too short for
Breen.
Trooper.
Then, they exploit a weakness in the shields to get aboard. Okay, fine. And they can't avoid beaming into a hallway where there are other people. That's fine. But no intruder alarm goes off. Now, we've never seen Breen dreadnoughts before this season of Discovery, at least not inside that I can recall. We don't know how they function. But a Federation ship would have an intruder alert that would go off when someone or something from outside the ship boarded the ship without permission. So the idea that a highly militarized society like the Breen don't have that is nonsensical. So why didn't an intruder alert immediately go off? Well, because it couldn't if the episode was going to go the way the writers intended it to go. But why not include a line of dialogue that covers that shows the crew disabling it somehow? They leave it completely unaddressed, so it just comes off as dumb. Another moment of dumb was Michael and Book stopping in the middle of this dangerous situation where they're trying not to be discovered by going off into a little alcove in the hallways to talk about their relationship. Now, it's very brief, and Michael does say, we probably shouldn't be talking about this right now, but it's still dumb, and they still did it. And why? There was no reason to do it. None at all. Another dumb thing, which I already mentioned, is that the whole time the away team is on the ship, they're not only communicating with each other over comms, which is fine, but they're also communicating with Discovery over comms, which again is fine, I guess, even though shields are up. But no one on the Breen ship could detect a signal leaving the ship and being in communication with Discovery. That didn't, the comm signal wasn't detected. And at certain moments, Michael and Book, for example, are talking to each other over comms while standing right in front of Breen soldiers. And even though when they address the Breen soldiers, their voices leave their helmets through the universal translator, their voices don't leave their helmets in between those statements to the Breen when they're talking to each other. So how did they manage that? How are they talking to each other in between talking to the Breen soldiers directly, but only the words that they're saying to the Breen soldiers directly are coming out of their helmets and being heard? How is that happening? It's not possible. Without them pushing a button every time they want to talk to each other and not have it come outside the helmet. Now, maybe they were doing it with their eyeballs on some, on the heads-up display inside the helmet. But again, they don't say this. So it's dumb. It's dumb. The only other thing I want to say that I didn't like about the episode, which isn't so much dumb, but just sort of an observation, is that every time they showed the away team's faces inside the helmet, a la Iron Man in all the Avengers movies, it looked kind of goofy, especially in the case of Adira, because I guess when the helmet comes on, the digital helmet that, and they all have now in the 32nd century, it surrounds your head underneath the material that makes the helmet in a head sock kind of thing, which, okay, that's not a big deal. We've seen that before in other shows and films where underneath a helmet, the character would have a head sock thing on. But it just, the way it sat on Adira's face, it just looked so goofy because it's not actually a head sock, probably. They put their head probably through a hole, or they had a draped thing around their head as they were shooting the scene. And it just looked like they were, it looked fake. It looked like they were sticking their head through a piece of foam or whatever while standing in front of a camera. And it just looked bad. It looked bad. And I couldn't stop thinking about how goofy it looked. So on balance, I can't give it more than a 2.5 out of 5 because there were a lot of cool moments, but there was so much dumb that it distracts from it. And I'm disappointed that they didn't resolve the progenitor tech storyline in this episode. Now, if they had, I probably would have said, well, they rushed it and they did a Deus Ex Machina, or they, went through it so fast that it's not believable, the story points. But I remain disappointed because now a certain portion of the final episode of the series is going to be dedicated to resolving this season's plot, which means there's a potential that they're only going to have a couple of moments to wrap up the entire series. I'm hoping they don't do that. I'm hoping that it's, resolved in under 45 minutes, and then they have the remaining 12 or 15 or whatever to actually wrap up the series, because otherwise that will feel really dumb. And it would just be the dumb icing on the dumb cake that this series has been. I'm almost certain that the latter is what's going to happen, because we know that they didn't know that the series was ending until after they had finished filming season 5, and they were only able to wrap up the series, as it were, by doing some reshoots. So the wrapping up of the series is probably going to get short shrift, and I think that's unfortunate. Even though I have hated this series, it's just one more thing that makes it all worse, that they're not going to have time to properly wrap up the series. The only thing I want to say before I go is that I think it was last week where I picked on the show, maybe the week before, for not using Saru in a plot point sequence that would have made great sense for his character to be used. And I said maybe they just didn't want to pay Doug Jones. But it turns out that Doug Jones was busy promoting Hocus Pocus 2 while season 5 was being shot. So I guess he wasn't available. So I guess I shouldn't have said it was a money thing and that they cheaped out. But at the same time, I'm still critical of what they did, because they could have found a way. They could have found a way to shoot the scenes that they shot that would have been perfect for him, with him, if they had wanted to. And maybe the reason they didn't is because it would have cost extra money to arrange that. So maybe it was about money, if not specifically about paying him. And, it's not like that would have been easy, because he does have to be in the makeup. So, it would have been hard to do with him on a remote shoot type of thing away from the regular sets. But they could have figured it out, or they could have maybe had him present by voice and, just used a projection of him, like a still photo type of projection of him during the scenes as his avatar, and say he's away, but, he's the best suited to do this. He knows this crew the best. And they could have included him just by having him do VO, but they didn't do that. And it's just, I'm still critical of that whole thing. But I wanted to clarify that it may not have been just that they didn't want to pay Doug Jones for the scene, as if they were cutting costs or whatever in the final season, because that's probably not what it was. Though we still don't have an explanation for why Awisha Khan and Detmer haven't been in the season, which I really do think is because they didn't want to pay them. I think they were cutting costs. There's no other explanation that makes sense for that, because I don't think they were in Hocus Pocus 2. Anyway, that's all I have to say about this episode. I'm going to be back, of course, to do a breakdown and review of the series and season finale episode once it's released next week. I'm going to get out of here for now until I return. I wish you peace and long life.